Hey guys, in this video I'm going to demonstrate the Canvas to Photoshop action. So the way the action works is similar to the way all my other actions work. You start off with a photo, you then trace over your subject or brush over your subject, you play the action, and in this case this action will create this effect. Okay, so and then we're going to go through all the layers. I'm going to talk to you about what they do, how to make customizations to it. Then I'm going to open up this stock photo and going to recreate this, and then lastly this stock photo and going to recreate this. Alright, let me just click through a few more examples I got of the effect. Okay, let's get into it. So here I have my photo, and there's just a small checklist of things we need to go through just to make sure your file is set up correctly and you don't run into any errors. Okay, so firstly look into your layer panel, and the photo that you've opened should look identical to this. It should say background and have that lock symbol there. Okay, so for those of you who have opened up a photo and it doesn't look like that, okay, so let me just set this up. So let's pretend for a second I've opened up my photo. It's called layer 1. What you need to do is go to layer, new background from layer, and that just sets it correctly as a background. So you only need to do that step if you've opened up your photo and it doesn't look identical to this, okay? The action won't work at all if that's not set up correctly. So still in the layer panel, go to this top right hand corner icon and click on that. It's hidden on my screen, but if you scroll down and go to panel options, you get this pop-up window. Down the bottom here, make sure add copy to copied layers and groups is ticked. Click OK. Next, go to image mode. Ensure you're in RGB color mode and 8 bits of channel is selected. Okay. Next, go to image size, and always make sure you're working with a high resolution photo. You can see mine is 2700 by 3200. I found with this result, the high resolution photo, the better the results. The lines are going to look a lot more crisp and sharp, and all the details. So say if your photo is only say 1500 pixels wide, scale it up to around 25, to even 3000 pixels wide. Okay, you're not going to notice any real reduction in the quality of the result with this action. So just crank up the size and you'll get a better result. Okay, click on that. So now what I need to do is load up the actions panel. So go to Window Actions, and it'll pop up here. Go to this top right hand corner icon, click on that, go to Load Actions, select the canvas2.atn file that was in the download, and that, it'll pop up here. So I'll come back to this because there's a few more steps we need to do. So what I need to do now is create a new layer. Okay, so go to Layer, New Layer. Now this layer must be called Brush, B-R-U-S-H, all in lowercase. Every one of my actions, this step is essential. The action won't work at all if you don't follow this step, so click OK. And the idea with the brush layer is that you have it selected and you want to fill in your subject with a color, or brush over your photo with a color. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use, because my subjects are pretty contrasted against the white background, I should be able to get away with I'm just going to select my magic wand tool here. Okay, I'm going to select my background, and I'm just going to start clicking into these white areas to make a selection. And now to increase my selection, you can see it hasn't selected this area in here. Hold down Shift. Okay, and then under here as well. And now if I select my brush layer and I fill that selection, so to fill a selection with your foreground color, which is this one here, just change it to a red, doesn't matter what color you pick. If you hold down Alt Delete or Option Delete, it'll fill in that selection with a color. But as you can see, it's filled in all our white areas. Now I need to invert that selection. Okay, So if I hold down Control Shift I or Command Shift I, now Alt or Option Delete to fill in that selection, you can see it's now filled in our subject. But it hasn't done the greatest job. You can see it's left out a few areas here. So I'm just going to quickly use my pen tool. So hit P on the keyboard. That'll activate the pen tool. I'm just going to do a really quick job here of just going around the edges of the photo. There's plenty of tutorials out there online about using the pen tool, so if you have no idea what I'm doing at the moment, just do a quick search and there's plenty of help out there. Okay, I'm just going to fill in that selection with my foreground color, which is red. There we go. Alright. So I have my brush layer there. I've filled in my subject. Now what I need to do is load up the brushes that were included in the download. Whenever there are brushes included in any one of my files, they must be loaded up before you play the action, or the action won't work at all. So hit B on the keyboard, that'll activate the brush tool. Right click anywhere over the canvas, and that will bring up the brushes panel. Now what I want to do, these are actually the brushes to use, but I'm just going to show you how to replace them. So you go to this icon here, top right hand corner, click on that. Go to Replace Brushes and select the Canvas 2 brushes.abr file. Okay, and then they will appear in here. Okay, so they're the brushes used to make all the effects. Okay, so click away from that. Alright, the action is now ready to go. So I'm just going to activate the Actions panel again. So over here, click on that play icon. So here's the Canvas 2 folder, twirl that open. Now the two actions here, don't worry about this one for the moment, I'll explain what that one does. You can run that action after the Canvas 2 action's finished and you've played around with all the layers, but I'll explain to you what that one does. So Canvas 2, so what I like to do before I play the action, I like to twirl it open. And twirling it open just reveals all the commands, so you can see if I scroll down, you can see all the steps to create the effect. And now when I click play, the action will begin to go down through these steps here, okay? And you can see the scroll bar to the right just going down, so to give you an idea of how much time it's got to go left. It'll take about two and a half minutes, depends on the resolution of your photo and the speed of your computer. So I'm just going to fast forward to the end of this video, to the end of the action, and we'll go from there. Okay, the action's all done, and you can see the result. So I'll collapse the Actions panel, and we'll go into the Layer panel now. So firstly, with any one of my actions, the first thing you want to do is when the action's finished playing back, okay, the main action folder will be selected, and what we want to do is collapse all these folders that are open, okay? So to do that, you hold down Control Alt or Command Option on a Mac and just click on this arrow next to the folder, click on that, and then it's just collapsed everything, alright? So it's just a good habit to get into when the action's finished playing back. So you can see up the top here I have the brush layer still hanging around, so if you wanted to run the action again, okay, just delete the Canvas 2 folder and you can click play. Every time you run the action, you know, the arrangement of all these textures and these lines are randomized. These drips here, they're all in a different position, so you can go for a different result if you want to run the action again. Okay, so let's go inside here, Canvas 2 folder, and we'll go down from the top. So this layer here, overall contrast, whenever I've got a layer that has in brackets opacity, I'm basically just reminding you to experiment with this layer through its opacity. So currently it's at 10%. Now if I just click on that word opacity there, click, hold and drag to the left and right, that's basically just increasing it from 0 to 100. So currently it's at the default mount was at 10%, and if I slowly drag to the right, you can see it increase the overall contrast of the design. So some of your designs you might not need to add contrast, some might need a lot, so it's there to experiment with. Overall saturation, if you double click on this one, okay, you can see this saturation handle here. If I drag that to the left, it makes it black and white. All the way to the right, it blows it right out, way too much saturation. But by default, I've actually moved away from the original colors of the photo a bit and added a bit more saturation. Okay, so if you want to revert back to more of the original colors, just drag that saturation back to around 0. Okay, this layer here, if you want to apply a single color over your design, just turn that visibility on for that layer, and then you can just double click on that box and play around with the colors there. So this layer here is really important. You'll see it pop up in a lot of my actions, and it's usually the first one that you want to jump to, particularly when using people as your subjects, because it adds all these detailed effects over everywhere that we brush. Okay, sometimes it can distort the face, and this layer here is a great way to just bring back some of the detail in the face, or any area of your photo where you want to bring back some detail. So currently, if I turn this layer on and off, it does nothing. It's because it's hidden by this mask. Okay, so you see these white boxes next to all these layers. They are layer masks. Whenever you brush or fill a layer mask black, it hides the layer, and white will reveal it. So if I just select that mask and hit Control or Command I to invert it, that'll flip it from black to white. Okay, you'll see now it's revealed. So all this layer is, it's a copy of the area that we brushed, and with no effects applied to it. So the way you want to use this layer, okay, is that you select the mask, okay, hit B, activate the brush tool, right click. Now in the top left hand corner of every brush set, I give you this soft brush, which is just ideal for brushing onto these masks. So select that, and if you brush white into that mask, we are going to be revealing some of that layer. So if I just brush everywhere, you can see that now I'm revealing original areas in my photo. But what I want to do is just brush a little bit over the face there and here. Okay, but at the moment it's too, it jumps from the perfect, original photo and then to all the effects. So what I want to do is create a bit of a blend. So with the layer selected, I'll just click and drag on the word opacity there. I'll drag to the left, so that's at 0. Now if I start dragging to the right, all I'm doing is increasing the opacity of that layer. So as you can see, as I drag to the right, I'm slowly bringing the detail back in. So this will vary from photo to photo. So I'm just going to use about 50% of the opacity of where we brushed. Okay, those white areas. Okay, so we'll come back to that layer again on the arrow examples. It's very important. Now this layer here, use original photo color. Okay, I'm just going to zoom out a bit. So by default, I do vary the colors a bit over your subject. If you want to overlay the original colors, just turn the visibility on for this layer. Okay, so you can see that there. Okay, so that's a very important one to check out every time you run the action. Just quickly turn that one on, see if it looks better with the original colors. Okay, and don't forget that the overall saturation will be turned up as well. So if you turn that back to 0 and then you turn this one on, okay, you're going to bring back the true colors of your photo. Alright, just going to turn this saturation back up a bit. Alright, moving on down. So these two layers here, you probably don't need to use too often. We'll get around to changing the background color here, but these are basically spotlights. If you turn them on, very subtle because we're on a white background here, but they are very soft spotlights coming in at 2 different angles. Now if you double click on these boxes, okay, you can play around with the angle here of the light, and you can also change the scale here. Okay, and same with this one, it's just a copy of that spotlight one, just at a different angle, and the scale is a bit smaller. So you can experiment with those two. Oops, zoom in here. Now, this folder here, extra design elements, if I turn it off, okay, you can see what that is doing. Basically, that adds details that extend beyond the area that we brushed. Okay, so you can see there's our brushed area. Now I'll turn these elements on and off. See those there? So it's the drips and these little curly shapes there. So if you turn that off, If we go inside this folder, okay, we've got a couple of layers. We've got these two here called wiggly parts 1 and 2. They are those little wiggly shapes. I'll turn those off. You can see those. Okay, and again, all these layers and folders have got masks, so you can control exactly, where they appear. So say for example, I didn't want, say these drips down the bottom here on his feet. Okay, so I'll select the mask on drips 1. I'll grab a black brush because I want to hide the layer. So I'll brush that away, and drips 2, I'll brush that away. So drips 1 and 2, it's basically the same layer. Okay, I've just stacked them on top of each other to increase the intensity of the layer. So if I turn it on and off, you can see how it just boosts the intensity. So you'll have to brush on both of those masks. But for example, if I turn this one on and off, I can just grab my black brush and say I'll brush down here to hide it. Okay, and you can also duplicate these layers. Just hit Control or Command J, and you can move them around. Oops. You can move them around. You can rotate them to create a lot more parts if you want. This folder here, lines. Now, if I turn this one off, that removes all the line work from your photo. So this is an important layer. This is an important folder to the overall effect. So if you go inside here, there's just a couple of layers here. Now these dash lines, you can see these lines running throughout our subject. They will only appear in the shadows of, or the darker tones of your subject. So if I turn it off, you can see that there. Okay. So not every one of your designs, you might turn the one off and think it looks better. I find that sometimes, but some look really good with it on. And again, control where you want it to appear through the mask. So say for example, I didn't want these lines here to appear. I'm just brushing black over the mask at the moment. Okay, so that's that. Maybe a little bit here. Okay, looks pretty good everywhere else. And one thing I forgot to cover, if I go back inside the extra design elements, you've got these drips here, and this can work with any layer. Okay, if you double click on any one of these layers, okay, and say if I wanted to color these drips, I could go to color overlay. Okay, and you can see you can change the color just clicking this box here. Say if I wanted a blue, so you can change the color of those drips. Okay, and that applies to any one of these layers. Just double click, color overlay, and set to go. Okay, so back into the lines folder. So whenever dash lines, now the contour lines are the ones that make up pretty much all the detail. Okay, I'll turn these on one by one. So 4, and you might find you don't have to use all these lines. Just by default I'll turn them all on to make your result look as detailed as possible. But sometimes it looks better with some of them turned off. So just go down, turn them on and off, see what you like. Also play around with the opacity. Okay, so when I click on this one here, I'll look up the opacity at 60%. This one's at 20, this one's at 50, this one's at 50. So they're all different opacities. So if you just select a layer and hit numbers on the keyboard, that's a quick way of changing the layer opacity. So currently it's at 60%. So if I just hit 9 on the keyboard, you see that's changed it to 9, 1, change it to 10, I've hit 0, that'll change it to 100. Okay, so that's just a great way, rather than moving your mouse over the opacity and dragging around, just hit numbers on the keyboard. Okay, now these 4 folders here are very important. So if I turn them all off, you can see it hides everything except the lines. Okay, so there's all our line work, and then you can see the faces appearing a little bit here. It's because we brushed it on the top here. You can see that. So I've broken apart your subject into shadows, midtones, and highlights. So if I turn on the shadows here, you see that just fills in the darker tones of your subject. You got midtones 1 and 2. Okay, that'll look for slightly lighter ranges, and then you've got the highlights that will fill in the brightest points of your photo. And the good thing about this is that you can play around. If I don't want the highlights, I can turn that folder off. Okay, and that creates a pretty cool effect around this guy because it's blending in to the background. Okay, same with the shadows. I can turn that off, and that creates a pretty cool effect. And don't forget that you've got these masks again. So say for example, if I flick this off, and I'm looking around this subject here, and say I didn't want this arm filled in. So what I'll do, I'll just select the mask, I'll grab a black brush, and I'll just brush that away, just like that. And I'll turn it back off again, I'll take another look around, maybe her feet here, I can brush that away, and down here. Okay, just like that. Maybe also on his belt. And then I might jump to the highlights here, and I'll brush these away. Something like that. Just going for something really sort of abstract. But looks cool. Okay. So if you go inside these folders, so we're going inside the highlights folder, I've broken them down into different layers. So if you turn all these off, that's just hiding the highlights again. And if you move these layers around, you can see that every different sort of aspect of your photo that's broken down into highlights, I've broken them down into different layers. Okay, so you can actually just move these around. Okay, so if you want to add a lot more detail to your photo, you just select one of these layers and just offset it a little bit. Okay, so you can see that there. So that's really cool. And again, you can use that trick where you just double click on this layer, color overlay, and you can apply a solid color to that set of highlights. Okay, so that's pretty cool as well. So you can turn them from white highlights to black. Okay, so a lot of room to experiment here. Now, a quick way to change the colors is that I've added this layer here at the top of every one of these folders. Okay, so you can see this green layer here. If you turn that one on, you can apply just quickly a solid color to the highlights. And if you double click on this layer, you can use this hue slider here, and that will quickly, it gives you a quick preview of applying a solid color to the highlights. You can play around with the saturation here, okay, and also the lightness. Okay, I actually think that looks really cool, just that blue. So what I might do, okay, I might just make this a bit darker, only because I like this blue here and the way it's sort of bleeding down to the subject. So I'm going to leave that, but I don't like it on a helmet here. So what I'm going to do is select the mask of this highlights color layer, because if I hide this layer here, it's reverting back to the original look. So it's just, if I just brush black to hide this layer, it will give us a bit of flexibility and control where that blue appears. Okay, I think that's looking pretty cool. Okay, so that's the highlights, and it's the same setup with the midtones. So if you go inside here, you've got different midtone layers that you can move around. Midtones, the same thing again. So you tick on this box. So turn on the visibility for this layer, and then it will fill the midtones in with a solid color. And again, just play around with the hue slider. But I like it sort of grey, so we'll leave that. Midtones too, it's just a different range of midtone colours. You can turn on this again. It's a good way to quickly preview where those midtone layers are by turning on this layer. So I can quickly identify where those sections are. I think that red looks really cool. I'm just going to quickly play around with this. Actually, that yellow looks cool as well. So I might actually, I like this golden colour. Something like that. I'll just lower the saturation down a bit. Okay, that's looking cool. Now this one here I've put above the shadow layer. It is essentially a copy of our background. So the action creates a textured background, okay, and I've made a single layer copy of it, and I've put it above the shadows. So what it does, it will fill in, it'll overlay a texture throughout the shadows of our subject. So if you look at this this character here, and I turn this layer on and off, you can see how, if I move this around, you can see the texture in there. So just turn that one on and off. It might not suit your photo, it might. This one looks pretty cool. If you want it to affect more of your subject, you can drag it above, all the way up to the highlights, and then that way the texture is actually sitting on top of all, highlights, midtones, and shadows. So I might just put up there for the moment. Okay. Now this layer here, vignette, pretty simple. It will just darken up the edges of your canvas. Okay, just helps sort of bring the focus into the middle of the canvas. So you can center one on and off. You might not like it, you might. So that's that. Now this one here, original stylized backgrounds. I've got in brackets opacity. Now this one isn't really going to do much because my background behind my subjects was just white. So say if there was buildings behind my subject, you would faintly see them in the background there. And what you would do is just use the opacity of that layer to reveal more of that background. It will be black and white. Okay. So just play around with that layer. Now this folder here is our background textures. Okay. So if you just want a solid color background with no textures, just turn that folder off. Okay. So now you've just got a solid color, and you've got this background color here. So just double click on that box, and you can just change the color here. Okay, pretty simple. Black. Okay, now if you're using a black background, you probably don't want the vignette because you can see it creates a bit of banding. So you can just turn the one off. And if you want to export your subjects on a transparent background, all you need to do is turn off the background color and then your background layer. So now it all falls onto a transparent background. So you can just save that out as a PNG or whatever, and yeah, drop it onto your other work. Okay, so I'm just going to change this back to a grey. I'll turn this texture folder back on. Now let's go inside here because there's a lot of layers in here. So if I twirl open that folder and go inside, you can see I've broken down all the elements that make up the textured background onto separate layers. Okay, so there's 13 different textures that make up the look of this background. And on each one of these textures, I've got a solid color layer attached to it. So if you turn that one on, if you just go down the line here and turn them on, you can see it apply a solid color. Some are really faint, some will be more prominent. So you can see that one there is those little cuts. So if I just double click on this box and change to something bright, like a bright green, or maybe yeah, that's better. So you can see the detail there. So you can recolor. You can spend a few minutes just going down here, and generally what I like to do is pick colors off my subject. So if I just double click on this box, I'll use the eyedropper tool here, and I can just select the blues, click around the photo here and experiment with different colors. Pick this gold, which looks pretty cool. And what I also like to do is, well, firstly, the background textures folder is only set to 50% opacity. Okay. So if you drag this to 100%, you can see the textures become a lot more intense. Alright, and if you want to make them even more intense, hide this mask here, okay? If I hold down Shift and click on that mask, it will just temporarily disable it. And so that is all the textures, at 100%, which is a bit too strong, which is why I've controlled, well, sort of lowered the intensity of it for the default result. Okay. If you double click on this mask here, you can adjust this density handle, and that's another way of adjusting the intensity of the background textures. Alright, just leave it at that. So what I want to do here is, actually I'll turn that opacity back down to 50%, it's a bit too strong. Like that. So what I want to do here is make these textures a bit more prominent. Now what I like to do is drag any textures that I want to be much more visible. I will drag outside of the background textures folder. Okay, so say texture 2 here, I want to drag this outside, and I want to keep this color. So if I hold down shift while clicking, so if I click on this and shift, click on that, I'll drag this outside of the folder. Okay, and you can see now the texture becomes a lot more visible because now it's not controlled by the mask of this folder and also its opacity. So now what I can do is just double click in this box, and I can create a white texture, which looks really cool. So I'm going to keep that. Now texture 1, I'm going to drag this one outside as well. So shift click those, drag it out. Okay, and I'm going to make this a blue. Let's have a look. Something like that. And I'm just going to keep going down the line here and check out some of these other textures. Now these three, you can see they're pretty consistent, the red, orange, and I've recolored these ones different colors. They are just the drips, those background drips there, okay? So if you turn on the colors for those, you won't really notice much, but they're very faint drips in the background. So the real prominent drips that come off your photo are in the extra design elements folder down the bottom there, and the really faint background ones are in here. Okay, so I'm pretty sure if I drag these outside of this folder, you can see them more there. So they sit very faintly in the background. Anyway, I'll keep going down here. I'm just going to check out a few more of these textures. Don't mind this one, but I'll make it a bit more of a really soft yellow. That'll do. Okay, and that is essentially how all the layers work. Very, very simple to use and a lot of fun. So the key is really just to experiment. Quickly go down and turn folders on and off. Okay, that looks really cool actually. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to brush away. So you can see how I thought I was done, and I've just quickly gone back and turned this folder off, and I'm just identifying areas that look pretty cool with this blue off now. So brush that away. Kind of like the helmet with that little bit of yellow in it. Okay, pretty cool. Now a little trick, well, what I like to do when I think I'm done with the design, I like to flatten everything onto one layer. So if you go Control Shift Alt E or Command Shift Option E, it'll just merge everything onto one layer here. So now if I move that around, you can see, yeah, it's on one layer. And what I like to do is I set the blend mode to hard light. Okay, oh, actually just undo that. Okay, I'll do that again. Control Shift Alt E or Command Shift Option E. Okay, and I'll set that to hard light. And so what it does, it really just it boosts up the brightness, the color saturation, just intensity of the design. What I like to do is I drag that back to 0% opacity, and I just slowly increase it, the opacity. And what that's doing is just adding a lot more sort of punch to the design. And most of the time, I find it looks pretty good, at around 20% opacity, just adding a little bit. So I'm just going to add a tiny little bit here. Okay, so if I turn that on and off, you can see how it just adds a little bit of a boost to everything. So that's just a nice little touch. Okay, now this, going inside the actions panel, this layer here, this action here, smooth design, I've got in brackets CS6 plus only. It's only available on CS6 and above because it uses Photoshop's oil paint filter. I'm pretty sure it wasn't available in CS5 and below. So if you just, if you click on this and click play, and just give it a couple of seconds. Okay, so what it does, it creates two layers at the very top here. You've got this one called Smooth Design, and this one above it called Add Sharpening, again in brackets opacity. So if I turn this, if you just look at the design here as I turn these on and off, so you can see it adds a bit of smoothing. And if I zoom in here, can see if I turn them on and off now, you can see the smooth design adds just a really subtle oil paint effect over everything, and what that does, if there's any sort of pixelation or whatever, it smooths that out. So if I zoom out here, it actually gives off a smoother result, smoother end result. And you know, you don't need to use this at 100% opacity. The add sharpening layer here basically just brings out a lot of the details. So you can see as I turn it off, on and off, you can see it pop a lot more. And you can blend between, you know, you don't need to use 100% opacity of the oil paint. I can shift select these two layers, click and drag their opacity to 0, and then slowly bring it back to the right. You know, so I can use about 70%, but for this example, I actually think it looks pretty cool at 100. And say I didn't want the oil paint effect over my subject's faces, I can just use this mask here, brush black, and then brush that away. So then that's just falling down onto our design below. You see that? So there we go, pretty cool result there. What I'm going to do is just shift select all this, hit Control G to group it, and I'll just flip between that and the original. So there's our original, and there's just with a few minutes work. Okay, let me move on to the next example. Alright, so I've just finished running the action on the next example here, and if I just hold down Control, Alt, or Command Option, and click on the arrow, collapse it, I'm going to hide this canvas folder so you can see the original photo, so you can see the before and after there. Now, with the image size, this photo was actually originally only 1500 pixels high, so I've cranked the size right up, and you can see that the result is still really crisp, and you know, the line work is very fine. So definitely size up your photo if it's a bit too small. Now I'm just going to open up what I'm going to try and create something close to. Okay, so you can see need to do a lot of recoloring of the background. There's some orange bits coming off his shoulder, and there's also this texture that I've put in the background of these trees. So I'm going to show you how to import and place a texture into the background. Okay, so let's go. I'm going to go down to the... What I'm going to do first is change the background color. I'm just going to click around my photo here, and you know, get a color. I'll go just this green here. You can always come back to changing that. Now I might just lower the opacity of the background textures here, which is a bit too strong. Alright, and what I might do is go inside here, and I'm going to drag this one outside of the folder. Okay, and I'll go for an orange. But what I might do first, I'm just going to hide this. I'm going to go into these folders here. I'm just going to turn on the color here to see where it's affecting. So might just add a bit of color to these highlights, and I want that orange tone, something like that. I'm just going to brush away the areas where I don't want it to be orange. Okay, I've just selected the mask and brushing black. So we get a little bit of orange there. I'm going to go into the mid-tones again. I turn this one on. Leave that. The shadows. Okay, that'll do it for the moment. I'm going to go back to the texture one. I'm going to turn it on. Now looking at this, I don't actually want... I really like the texture around his head here and a little bit here. But I don't want all this to the side here, so I'm just going to select my texture one layer. I'm going to create a mask. Okay, so just click this icon here. That will create a mask. Okay, and now if I select my black brush and select the mask and just start brushing that texture away. Okay, I might just lower the opacity down on that texture. Alright, I'm going to go inside my background textures folder again. I'm going to turn on this one. I'm going to drag these outside of the folder. And I'm going to double click in this box. Okay, that green looks really cool. And that. Now I'm going to keep going down here and turning, so you can see that just adds a little bit of orange in some of the textures. I'm going to turn up this opacity display to 100%, see how that looks. Looking cool. This one, I'll just leave white. This one I'm going to make more of a brown. This I'm going to go brown again. I think that's looking pretty good for the moment, so I'm just going to leave that as is. Now I can see that, you know, it's put a lot of texture and lines over his face here, so I'm going to clean that up. I'm going to go to the reveal regional photo layer, select the mask. I'm going to grab a white brush because I want to reveal that layer. Just brush that on. I'm going to lower that opacity to 0 and just increase a little bit so it keeps some of the texture. Now if I didn't want these lines at all over his face, okay, I can select that lines folder, mask, that mask there, and just brush black into that to hide it, and that will just remove all the lines. Okay, so now if I bring this opacity to 0, you can see it's just created this effect with no lines, so it's probably a bit more suitable for this design without any lines. Okay, I'm just going to lower the intensity down of all these dashed lines, a bit too strong, so I'm going to inside my lines folder, select the dashed lines layer. I'm just going to lower this opacity down a bit. Okay, I'm going to turn off all these contour lines and turn them on one by one. See how it affects things. Might lower the opacity of this one down to 20%, so I just hit 2 on the keyboard. That looks good. That looks good. So all looking good. Now, one thing I also like to do is experiment, you know, I'll shift select all these layers here and also the background textures, and I'll hit Control or Command G to group them. And then what I like to experiment with is dragging this folder up above everything, up the top here. So what that essentially does, it overlays all the textures on top of our subject. Okay, I might just bring this down. No, I'm going to get it at the top there. So you can see, you know, and it's a pretty cool effect, but it's a bit too strong over areas. So you can see his face, you know, it's hidden a lot of his body. Now, a little trick that I like to do here is if you just add a mask to this folder, okay. Now, so I want to reduce the intensity of all the textures over my subject. So this is a good thing. This is why I keep the brush layer hanging around. It's because you can make selections like this. So if I just hold down Control or Command and click on that layer, what it does, it just creates a selection. Now if I select the mask, okay, I want to hide the textures from that area. So I need to fill that selection in black, okay, because I want to hide it. So making sure my foreground color is black, I hold down, you know, Alt Delete or Option Delete, okay. So that'll fill that selection in black. So now you can see it's hidden the texture. But what I like to do is I still want to use a little bit of the texture. I still want some of that texture to show through. So I double click on this mask and lower the density. So you can see as I lower the density, the texture starts to come back in. If I bring it to 0, it's like we never applied the mask. If you look at the mask here, while I drag this density around, you can see how it goes from grey to black. So if I lower that down, it just brings a little bit of the texture back in. And that's what I want. Now, this is looking pretty. I'm just going to try turn this one. I'm just going to lower the opacity down for. Oh, maybe just turn it off. Does it need it? Maybe it does. Maybe 5%. Yeah, 5%. That'll do. I'm just going to turn the vignette off for a sec. So this is looking pretty good. I'm going to now import that tree background texture. So I'll go to File, Place Embedded. It's somewhere in here. There it is. Okay, so here's my texture. You can see I've got this bounding box around it. It's basically telling me to, it's asking me to confirm the size and the placement of it before it, before it locks it in. So I'm going to hit Control minus or Command minus to zoom out. And I'm going to hold down Shift and Alt or Shift Option and click on those corners, and that's going to scale it up. I don't really want that big tree in there, so I'm just going to drag this to the side and up a bit. Hit Enter. That will confirm the placement. You hold down Control or Command 0 to fit your design to screen. Okay, so here is our background texture. You can see it is a smart object. It has that little icon on it, which means I can keep scaling this texture up and down. Okay, hit Enter and up again, and it will not lose quality. Okay, there's a lot of drawbacks to having your photo set as a smart object. Can't apply a lot of filters. Okay, it will ask you to rasterize the layer before we do that. And I need to do that now because I want to convert this to black and white. So currently if I hold down, if I go Control Shift U or Command Shift U, that does nothing. It's usually the shortcut to desaturate your photo. So I'm going to right click on this layer and go to Rasterize Layer. Control Shift U or Command Shift U, and that has just removed all the color. Now I want to move this this background texture because at the moment you can see it's sitting on top of the shadows. So, sitting on top of the shadows so you can see our shadows are visible. So I'm going to move these below so it's just in our background. Okay. And what I want to do is just experiment with changing the blend mode. So, just click on the drop down menu here and I'm going to try overlay. And I can just use the down arrow here to change. So I like hard light here, but what I want to do, I want to lower this opacity right down. So I'm just going to do that. I'm just going to bring it up a little bit. Okay, 23%. And I want to remove this texture down the bottom here where he's running. Okay, because it looks like he's running on top of the sticks here. It just doesn't look right. So I'm going to add a mask to that layer. Now I want to gradually blend between our background layer to our photo texture here. So I'm going to hit G on the keyboard or over here in the tool panel, select the gradient tool, and I want to blend from black to transparent. So yeah, if you double click on this box here, brings up the gradient editor and look for the one that runs from black to transparent. Now because I want to hide this layer, we want to brush black, but the gradient, if I just click and drag a line here, what it does, I'll go inside this mask, I'll hold down Alt or Option, click on that mask. So you can see we've created a gradient from black to transparent. So black will be hiding that layer. So now you can see, if I hold down Shift, disable that mask, you can see there was our original, and that was the gradient. So we'll create a nice blend from the background to the texture. Okay. Now that's all looking pretty good. I'm going to just check out this saturation for a sec. The contrast. Okay, we'll just turn it up a little bit. Now I'm going to just check out the use original photo color. I'm going to turn that on. So that's a good example there. So you can see when you turn that one on, it overrides all the colors just to overlay the original colors of our photo. But I think this looks better without it. Spotlights. Spotlights. Okay, there, I might just lower that opacity down. I don't think it really needs it. Or maybe the tiniest little bit. And then something else what I like to do is when I think I'm done, I like to play around more with the colors. So I just select the top layer here and go down here, click on that, and I'll either grab a curves adjustment layer or a color balance layer. So I'll grab the curves, and you can experiment with the colors through this drop down list here. So currently RGB will affect the red, green and blue channels, so if I just drag that handle around, you can see it affects everything. But if you go into these individual color channels, you can just experiment with the red channel. So what I'm going to do is just, and you can click around this this curve here and add different anchor points. Just going to try and add a bit more contrast here. I'll do that. Blue. I think it needs that. So I'll just turn that on and off, compare against the original. Okay, I'm going to drag that opacity to 0, and I'm just going to use a little bit of that adjustment layer at 50%. Now I'm going to add a color balance adjustment layer, and I'm just going to experiment with these handles as well. Might jump to the shadows. Don't think it needs it, so I'm just going to delete that. Okay, I think we got it pretty accurate. Now I'm going to check out the smooth design. I'm just going to see what that looks like. Okay, I'm just going to turn these two off, compare against. I think I prefer it with it off. I kind of like that bit more of a grungier look. So I'm going to delete those and compare against the original. So there's our original photo, and there we go. Alright, I'll move on to the last example. Alright, so again I've just run the action, and so what we're going to try and get to here is this. So you can see that's where we're at now, and we need to get to that. So I'll just keep that open for reference. Now, so the first thing I want to do is clear up the face, okay? So I'm going to jump to I'm going to collapse these folders first. I'm going to jump to the mask, the reveal original photo, white brush, I want to reveal that layer. I'm just going to brush a big bit over the face there, and then I'm going to just use change the opacity. Now I can see like two little bits of texture here that I don't really like, I don't want. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to click down the folders here and try and identify where that texture is. Okay. Alright, so it's in midtones 2. It's out there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to select the mask of midtones 2, grab my black brush. Okay, so I want to hide it and brush that away. Brush all those details away. Okay, and also this little bit of texture here. See where that is. Okay, so it's not any one of those. Might be. Okay, it's in extra design elements, so I'm going to brush that away. Alright, so that is much better. Okay, so next, oops, sorry. So let's look at the reference. So I can see that I've changed the colors of the shadows here. Alright, to more of like a grey. So I'm going to jump to the shadows. I'm going to turn on the shadow color. And I am just going to play around with this handle a bit. I'm going to lower the saturation. Yeah, I think that'll do. Okay, this background, let's jump to the background textures. Now I can see that background texture is pretty white, so I'm going to draw it a bit brighter, and then I'm going to drag this one outside of the textures folder, and make this a black. I'm just going to lower the opacity right down. Okay, I might just experiment with flipping this texture vertically, see what it looks like. So you can go edit, edit transform, you can flip horizontal or vertically. Vertical, I'm just going to move that around. No, it doesn't look better. I'm going to flip it horizontally. Alright, now this texture, I'm just going to duplicate these two layers, so shift select them, Control Command J. Deeper red. Now I'm going to play around with this mask here, the density. Okay. And I can see that I've blended from the background, the original background, okay, to our textured background. So how do we do that? We go down to the background color layer. So you can see if I hide this background color layer, it just falls onto the original background. So that's another technique you can use if you want, you know, your stylized subject to fall into the original background. Okay, turn that off. And now this is a good example to show this layer here, the original stylized background opacity. So if I turn it up to 100%, you can see that, I'm just going to turn off the vignette, you can see that it has brought back our background. Now the reason why I've got stylized written in there is because I've applied this, this stylization to it. Okay. Now by default it's 10%. It's very subtle. So as I increase the opacity, you can slightly bring back your backgrounds. But in this case, we want to blend onto the original background. So to do that, we just select the background color layer. Okay. And again, we're going to use that gradient. That gradient method. So hit G, bring out the gradient tool. Okay, I've already got black to transparent selected, so I just click and drag like that. Excuse me. So now I've created that blend. You see if I go inside the mask, it's hidden down here and gradually blends to show the texture. Sorry, the solid color background here. Now I'm just going to turn on the original photo color, see what that looks like. I'm just going to experiment with turning some of these off, see what it looks like. So what I might do here, I might also use that gradient effect on the shadows, okay? Now I kind of like this effect here, how the shadows are missing and sort of just creates these gaps in the skateboard as well. But I don't want it to be through the whole of my subject here, just down the bottom. So again, use the gradient tool, G, I'm just going to drag a mask. Drag a line up from there, so you can see I've created a little bit of a blend there, which looks pretty cool. Now I'm going to just experiment with adding colour to these. Green actually looks pretty cool. I'm just going to see what else we got. Look at that, mid-tones 1. Probably 2. Yeah, a bit too much. Won't be using that. And again, if you've got time, you can experiment with moving all these ones around. Like say if I move this one out to the side. Actually, what I'm gonna do, I'll duplicate it. So H3, I can duplicate that. Control Command J. Just made a copy of it. Now if I move this one out, maybe I just want, I don't want it over there. Maybe I just want this little bit here on the legs. I'm going to invert that mask, Control Command I, so it makes it all black, it's hidden. Grab my white brush. Okay, use the left and right square brackets to adjust the brush size. If you want to flip from black to white, so currently black is my active color. If I brush, I do nothing because I'm brushing black into a black mask. So I'll hit X, flips it to white, and I can just reveal that little bit of that duplicate layer that we created. So I mean, you can double click on this and do that color overlay technique. I can color pick this, okay, and I can move that around. So heaps you can do. I think that'll do. I could sit here and experiment for ages with all the layers, but I think you get the drift. So yeah, that is it. If you have any troubles, just send me an email and I'll help out. But yeah, if not, have fun using the effect. Thanks.